She was the untouchable CEO, rich, brilliant, cold as marble. He was the janitor no one noticed, a single dad with worn boots and quiet eyes. But when she smirked, "If you can play Liszt, I'll kiss you right here." She never expected the man holding a mop to be the one who'd break her heart wide open and heal it. This is not just a story about music. It's about the kind of love that doesn't need words, only one piano, and the courage to play it again. If stories of kindness, redemption, and second chances speak to your soul, you're exactly where you need to be. Tap subscribe to join our journey at Soul Moment Story, where every tale is a quiet song to the heart. Now, let's begin. The grand atrium of the Harper Lynn Cultural Center shimmered with chandeliers, marble columns, and the hum of champagne-fueled conversation. Evening gowns swept across polished floors. Murmurs of business deals and gallery acquisitions floated beneath classical music, played by a string quartet in the background. And then, silence. Her voice cut through the golden air like a violin string snapping. "If you can play Liszt," Harper Lynn said, tilting her chin toward the man crouched beside the Steinway, "I'll kiss you. Right here." A ripple ran through the crowd. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. A few people laughed awkwardly, unsure if they'd heard her correctly. The man hadn't moved. He was still kneeling, polishing the black lacquer finish of the grand piano, as if the world around him hadn't shifted. His hands, calloused and strong, ran a clean cloth across the final key with care that felt reverent. He didn't look like a musician. Not anymore. Tall, broad-shouldered, with rolled sleeves revealing forearms shaped by labor, not privilege. He wore a faded maintenance uniform and boots scuffed by time. His name tag read, L. Grant. And the way he touched the piano? It wasn't routine. It was memory. Something buried. Something aching. People whispered. "Is she serious?" "That's Landon, the janitor. He fixes elevators and vacuums hallways." But Harper didn't blink. Neither did he. No one knew why she said it. Maybe it was her arrogance. Maybe she wanted to mock the idea that art belonged to anyone but her world. Or maybe, deep down, she saw something in his silence that unsettled her. The internet, however, didn't care about nuance. By midnight, the video had gone viral. The headlines read, "Billionaire CEO publicly challenges working class, man to perform, classical masterpiece in exchange for a kiss. Romantic dare or classist jab. If you can play Liszt, I'll kiss you." Power, privilege, and a piano. The firestorm was instant. Some praised her boldness. Others accused her of humiliating a man just trying to do his job. But no one could stop watching. Because when Harper said the words, he didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. He didn't protest. He just closed the piano lid with a soft click and walked away. That's when the story truly began. His name was Landon Grant, age 42, U.S. Army veteran, honorably discharged after a roadside bombing shattered more than just his spine. It cracked the music out of him. Once hailed as a prodigy, the Oklahoma Thunder of the Keys, they used to say. He had performed at Carnegie Hall before he turned 18. But war changes tempo. So did fatherhood. 12 years ago, Landon left the stage and never returned. His wife had passed unexpectedly. His daughter, Lily, barely a year old, needed a different kind of composition. One written in packed lunches and whispered lullabies. Music became memory. Life became duty. He took the night shift cleaning buildings in the same city where his name once lit up marquees. He didn't mind. Until that night. Until the woman with the steel heels and storm-gray eyes looked down at him like he was invisible, and then dared him to be seen. Harper Lynn was not accustomed to being questioned. especially not by strangers online. CEO of Lynn Aerospace, she'd inherited power, yes, but built her empire by doubling it. At 35, she commanded boardrooms, tech conferences, and cultural events with the same iron will. But behind the sculpted cheekbones and 5-inch heels was a loneliness too sharp to name. She wasn't cruel, just efficient. To her, the piano had always been decorative, like most things in her world, until he touched it like it was sacred, until the look in his eyes, quiet but bottomless, stayed with her long after she went home. The next morning, she tried to move on, scheduled meetings, brushed off reporters, sent a PR statement about celebrating hidden talent in unexpected places. But it wasn't enough. People wanted a response. More than that, they wanted him. Thousands were now asking, will the janitor take the challenge? Does he even know how to play? What's his story? Harper watched the replay again, the way he touched the keys, how his fingers lingered not like a custodian, but like a man who once bled music. And for the first time in years, she found herself wondering, what if he could? What if she had just challenged a man who once played Liszt as easily as breathing? Landon didn't have social media, but he heard the noise. One of the security guards showed him the video. Someone had filmed the moment from the mezzanine. It had over 4 million views in less than a day. He watched himself on screen, kneeling beside the piano, frozen as Harper spoke. He didn't even remember breathing in that moment, only the feel of the keys under his palm and the sudden, long-buried ache in his chest. Liszt. He hadn't played Liszt in 20 years, but his hands still remembered. That night, when Lily had gone to sleep, Landon returned to the Harper Lynn Cultural Center. He didn't come for revenge. He didn't care what people thought. He came because something inside him had stirred and refused to sleep again. The janitor stood alone in the atrium under the moonlight. He sat down at the same piano, and with trembling fingers, he lifted the lid. Then he played a single note, then a second, then silence. But it wasn't fear, it was reverence, like a priest returning to the altar. Because he knew, if he played Liszt again, he wouldn't just be dusting off memories. He would be reclaiming the man he used to be. And this time, he would do it for Lily. Harper Lynn wasn't used to being haunted. She had been raised on logic, ambition, and quarterly projections. Her mind sliced through data like glass, efficient, precise, unemotional. But ever since that night, since her challenge had gone viral, she couldn't stop thinking about the janitor, about him, the way he had touched the piano, not like an employee maintaining furniture, but like a man greeting something sacred. There had been something in his eyes, not offense, not pride, grief. She couldn't name it at the time, but it lingered in her memory like a ghost, quiet, trembling, holy. She looked him up, of course. She always did her research. Landon Grant, Army veteran, no criminal record, clean employment history, custodial staff, contracted through a facilities vendor, no social presence, no trail of interviews or resumes boasting musical degrees. And yet, there had been precision in the way he moved, the control, the stillness. She'd grown up around musicians, attended recitals and conservatories as part of Harper Lynn's philanthropic arm. She could spot posture, hands, poise. Landon Grant didn't clean pianos. He used to command them. She wanted to know why he stopped. So, one early morning, long before the cultural center opened to the public, Harper walked into the north wing with coffee in hand and heels that echoed like clockwork across marble. And there he was. Same faded uniform. Same quiet presence. Mopping the hallway outside the closed music room. She slowed her steps. He looked up. Said nothing. But his eyes. Those were not the eyes of a stranger. They were the eyes of a man who'd already seen too much. "Do you play?" she asked, nodding toward the door. He looked at the wood. Not the woman. "No." "I've seen the video," she continued, forcing a small smile. "Half the country has. Some say you used to be a concert pianist. I clean floors." It wasn't bitterness. It was fact. He returned to his work, dipping the mop, squeezing out the water. Silence stretched. Harper leaned against the wall. "You looked at that piano like it was alive." "No, ma'am," he replied, calm as stone. "I looked at it like it was a memory. I don't touch what I can't carry anymore." That stayed with her. She didn't ask more, just left the coffee on the ledge and walked away. In the same building, 4 floors above, another soul stirred. 9-year-old Luna Grant sat in her room surrounded by scattered sheet music, pencil marks, and an old, slightly out-of-tune upright piano gifted to her by a retired music teacher who once heard her play by accident. Luna was different. She didn't just play music. She heard colors, each note a shape, each chord a burst of emotion. She had never been trained formally. Landon couldn't afford lessons. But somehow, Luna could listen to a piece once and replicate it, note for note, adding flourishes no child her age should know. The doctor said her heart was fragile, a rare congenital condition. Stress, excitement, even applause could strain it. No recitals, they warned. No competitions, no public performances. So she played in private, for herself, for her dad, and sometimes for the empty hallways at night when she knew he was cleaning floors just 1 story below. That evening, as the sun bled amber through the windows, Luna sat on her bench, tiny fingers dancing. The melody was Chopin, but the soul was hers. Landon stood quietly by the door, just listening. He didn't interrupt, didn't compliment, didn't ask her to stop. He just let the music live in the room. And when it ended, he whispered, "You were flying." Luna smiled. "Dad," she said, swinging her legs, "do you think music can fix broken things?" He knelt beside her, smoothed her hair. "It used to," he said. "But sometimes, fixing things costs too much." She tilted her head. "Like what?" "Like remembering what you lost." She didn't understand all of it, but she reached for his hand anyway. "I think it's okay to remember." He nodded. And that night, when she fell asleep, Landon stared at the old upright for a long time. He wanted to play, just one piece, just one moment. But his hands wouldn't move, because the last time he played was at his wife's funeral. The world was still talking. Social media had turned the challenge into a meme. A handful of pianists even responded, posting videos playing Liszt's La Campanella with the caption, "Where's my kiss, Harper?" But Harper didn't care about them. She cared about the man who didn't want the spotlight, the man who looked at a Steinway the way some look at gravestones. She found herself walking the north wing again the next day, slowing by the music room. The piano remained untouched. Landon was nowhere to be seen. But she noticed something. On the bench, placed carefully, precisely, was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't addressed, but she opened it anyway. Inside, scrawled in quiet handwriting, were just 5 words. "I don't play for kisses." Harper didn't smile. She exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a CEO. She felt like a woman who had said something reckless and accidentally awakened a man who had once lived entirely for the music. It was early Sunday morning when Luna first heard it. Her father had left to run errands, grocery shopping, medicine pickup, the usual quiet rituals of their simple life. He trusted her alone for a few hours. She didn't get into trouble. She only got into music. The apartment above the Harper Lynn Cultural Center was quiet, except for the soft hum of city life leaking through the windows. And the radio. Harper had been giving an interview on a podcast, one of those corporate shows trying to make CEOs sound relatable. Luna wasn't listening on purpose. It just happened to be on, background noise while she scribbled sheet music in her notebook. "He didn't even flinch when I said it," Harper's voice said through the speakers, amused but distant. "I told him, if you can play Liszt, I'll kiss you right here. Crazy thing is, he just kept polishing the piano like it was made of glass." The host laughed. "Liszt's not exactly beginner level." "No," Harper replied. "It was La Campanella. My father used to play it. But never like that. There's something brutal and beautiful about it. I guess I was testing him. Or maybe testing myself." Luna froze. La Campanella. She'd never heard that name. But the way Harper said it, the way the name curled in her voice like a sigh, stirred something in Luna's chest. She pulled her tablet out and searched. A recording came up. Classical. Fast. Sharp. The pianist's fingers blurred across the keys. The melody felt like rain running uphill, joyful, sad, frantic, controlled chaos. It made her breath catch. She didn't know what it was supposed to sound like. But she knew what it felt like. And that was enough. She placed her hands on the keys of her old piano and began to play. Downstairs, Harper had returned early to the center for a quiet moment before her afternoon board meeting. She needed silence, or at least the kind of silence where she could pretend her world wasn't falling into PR chaos. Her assistant had just handed her a printout. Is the Harper Lynn CEO mocking veterans? It was the third article that morning. Comments ranged from elitist to tone-deaf. She hadn't meant to insult anyone. She thought it had been a private moment, a joke tossed into the air like a pebble. Now it was a landslide. She slipped away from the front office, trying to escape the noise. As she passed through the rehearsal corridor, she heard something that stopped her mid-step. Piano? Not background music, not a speaker or recording. Live, emotional, human, coming from the stairwell above. Harper didn't think. She climbed. Each note pulled her like a thread. And when she reached the doorway of the janitor's apartment, modest, clean, unexpected, she saw the little girl, hair messy, feet dangling from the piano bench, and fingers flying. She wasn't playing perfectly, not in the technical sense. Her hands were too small to span certain octaves, and the piano itself was slightly out of tune. But she felt it. Every rise, every tremble, every lightning-fast arpeggio. She wasn't copying the music. She was the music. Harper felt her throat tighten. She hadn't seen a child play like that since, well, never. Her own father had been a pianist too, but he had never played for her. Not once. Only for others. For audiences. For glory. She had learned to clap at the right time, smile at parties, pretend she didn't want what every child wants. Music made just for them. This little girl, Luna, she realized, wasn't playing for an audience. She was playing for the music. Harper stepped forward, almost afraid to speak. "Do you know what that is?" Luna turned, startled, but not scared. "It's Liszt, I think. I just heard it once." Harper blinked. "Once?" Luna nodded. "On the radio. You said it. I looked it up. It was beautiful." There was a beat of silence. Harper looked around. No cameras, no stage. Just a girl, a miracle, playing lightning on ivory. She whispered, "You're a prodigy." Luna tilted her head. "I'm just Luna." Harper smiled. It was the first honest smile she'd worn in weeks. But then the door slammed open. Landon. His face went from confusion to fire in one breath. "What are you doing here?" Harper stepped back, instinctively raising her hands. I just heard her playing. I didn't mean to." "You heard her because you were listening where you don't belong." Luna slid off the bench. "Daddy, "Not now," he said, too sharply. Then softer. "Go to your room, baby." Luna hesitated. She didn't cry, but her eyes dimmed as she walked away. Harper watched the door close behind the child, her heart aching in a way she couldn't name. Landon turned, jaw tight. "I don't know what you're doing, or what game this is," he said, "but I won't let you put her in the spotlight." Harper took a breath. "She's not a spectacle," he snapped. "She's a child with a fragile heart. You don't know what playing like that does to her." Harper's voice was calm. She didn't look fragile. She looked alive. "She looked exposed," he said. "And I'm not going to let this world take from her what it took from me." His words landed like thunder. Harper didn't argue, because in that moment, she saw it. Not just a janitor, but a soldier, a father, a man still bleeding from an old wound no one could see. "I'm not here to change her," Harper said quietly. "I think she's already changing me." Landon didn't respond. He closed the door, gently, but firmly. And Harper stood there alone, wondering how something as soft as music could make the world feel so violently complicated. Harper didn't sleep that night. She tried. She poured herself a glass of red wine, pulled up quarterly reports, even skimmed a thriller novel she'd left untouched on her nightstand. Nothing worked. The image kept returning. That child, that melody, those eyes, and the man who'd shut the door with a whisper of grief louder than any scream. She couldn't explain it. This need to understand him. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something quieter, deeper, a thread pulling at her ribs. So the next morning, she called in a favor. Harper Lynn had many resources. Wealth, certainly. Influence, yes. But her true power lay in the invisible network she'd built. People who owed her, people who feared her, and a few who genuinely respected her. One of them worked at the Juilliard School. "I need everything you can find on a pianist named Landon Grant," she said over the phone, pacing her office, hand gripping her lukewarm coffee. He would have been active around 20 years ago. Classical. Liszt specialization. There was a pause, then a quiet whistle. "Harper, you're not just digging through talent. You're digging through legend." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Landon Grant was the American Liszt prodigy. Played Carnegie Hall at 22. He was called the boy with lightning in his veins. I mean, people wept when he touched a Steinway. Then he just disappeared. Walked away in the middle of his peak. Harper's heart thudded. Disappeared, why? Rumors. Some said injury, others said trauma. "I'll send you what I can." And she did. By noon, Harper sat at her desk staring at a black and white photo from a decades-old article. Landon Grant, 22, leaves Carnegie Hall audience in awe with La Campanella finale. Same face, younger, less weary, hands in mid-flight, eyes closed, piano keys a blur beneath him. She clicked to the next image. Another article. Prodigy turned patriot. Pianist joins army after mother's death. Then another. A roadside IED in Mosul. Sergeant Landon Grant survives blast that nearly severs his right hand. Harper felt her breath catch. She hadn't imagined it. There really was a war behind those eyes. But the story didn't end there. Months after the incident, the military issued an honorable discharge. Landon disappeared again. No interviews, no comebacks. Just silence. Until now. That night, Harper walked the empty halls of the Cultural Center like a ghost. The building had long since closed to the public, but she had the keys. The privilege of ownership. She wasn't sure why she went down to the storage floor. Maybe she thought she'd find him cleaning late. Maybe she hoped she wouldn't. But she stopped when she saw a light under the door. The old practice room. It wasn't on the schedule. Harper stood in the doorway, silent. Inside, Landon sat alone. No Luna, no mop, no uniform, just him. And a piano. Not playing, just sitting. His right hand hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. He pressed one note, then another. The sounds were soft, uncertain, like someone tracing the ghost of a melody they didn't want to resurrect. Then he whispered, not to her, to the piano, or perhaps to someone long gone. I told myself I'd never touch this again. Harper didn't move. He didn't flinch. He had known she was there. I didn't stop because of the injury, he said, eyes locked on the keys. They rebuilt the nerves, gave me therapy. I can play. His fingers danced slowly through a Liszt progression, not flawless, but hauntingly close. I stopped because of her. Harper stepped inside gently. Luna's mother? He nodded. She was the real musician. I just played louder. His voice broke on the last word. I met her backstage after a benefit concert. She was working tech, of all things. Said she didn't trust anyone who played Liszt without closing their eyes. He gave a small, bitter smile. She was the first person who ever loved me, not because of what I could do. Harper didn't speak. She felt instinctively this was a sacred place in his memory. She made me promise, if anything ever happened to her, I'd never let Luna grow up in shadows. No stage lights, no backstages. Just music, if she wanted it. Only if she wanted it. He ran his hand down the edge of the piano, reverent. When she got sick, heart failure, fast, aggressive, she asked me to play for her in the ICU. A pause. I couldn't. The words were barely a whisper. I sat by her bed while the machines beeped and doctors moved around like ghosts, and I just stared at my hands. I thought, what's the point of Liszt, of all that brilliance if I couldn't save her? Harper's throat ached. She died to silence, he said. Harper walked over, carefully, and sat beside him, not speaking. Just there. After a long silence, Landon added, the song she asked for was La Campanella. She said it always made her feel alive, even if it ends with a whisper. Harper gently touched the piano lid. I don't think it ended, she said. Not really. Landon looked at her. For a girl to hear Liszt once, and play it by ear, that's not chance. That's legacy. He looked away. She's sick too, he said. Same thing. Congenital heart condition. Different presentation, but the same storm. Harper breathed in sharply. She doesn't know? Only the basics. She knows she tires easily. Why I don't want her in crowds. Why I keep her world small. Harper swallowed. But she's not small. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. Outside the room, the hallway lights dimmed on their own, on a timer. But inside, between old memories and fragile hopes, something flickered. Not quite music. Not yet. But maybe something close. The Harper Lynn Foundation Gala was never meant to be subtle. Strings of warm Edison bulbs draped across the glass ceiling. Waiters weaved between rows of donors in tuxedos and silk. The grand piano, a pristine Steinway Model D, stood center stage like a sculpture carved from reverence. Harper stood by the ballroom entrance, flawless in a black satin dress, her expression unreadable. She wasn't just hosting tonight. She was hunting. A fundraiser was one thing, a reckoning was another. Her eyes scanned the crowd until she found him, Landon, pressed into a corner like a shadow. He wore a dark jacket, tie slightly crooked, hands clasped behind his back. He did not belong, but that was precisely why he had to be there. Mr. Grant, she said, stepping beside him, you know what tonight needs? He didn't turn. Let me guess. A miracle? A reminder, she said, of why music is still worth believing in. He exhaled slowly. This isn't about music. It's about spectacle. And sometimes, she said, eyes meeting his, spectacle saves lives. She stepped forward, nodding toward the stage. I told them, Harper said with a glint in her voice, that our next performer once made Carnegie Hall fall silent with a single trill. Landon's head snapped toward her. You didn't. I did. Harper, she held up a hand. You can leave now if you want. No one's going to stop you. Her voice softened. But they'll remember that silence. And she walked away. The lights dimmed. An announcer stepped forward. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to present a very special guest. A man who, once upon a time, reminded the world that Liszt was not just music, but fire. Please welcome Landon Grant. Applause erupted. Cameras turned. Phones raised. And the stage? Empty. The piano bench sat untouched. In the shadows of the exit hallway, Landon gritted his teeth. He turned his back. He was halfway out the door. Bah! Her voice was like a bell in snowfall. Luna stood just off stage, her dress a soft sky blue, her hair in a gentle braid like her mother used to do. She wasn't supposed to be here. But there she was, smiling, hopeful, braver than he'd ever been. If you play, she whispered, maybe Mom will hear it. His heart stopped. She wasn't asking for an audience. She was asking for presence, for memory, for love. Landon looked past her, at the glowing piano, at the glittering guests, at Harper, who stood at the back of the ballroom, hands folded, but eyes shimmering. He took a step, then another, and then, slowly, he walked toward the piano. The room fell into a hush so sharp, so immediate, it felt like the walls had inhaled. Landon approached the Steinway like a man returning to a grave. He didn't sit. He didn't touch the keys. Instead, he pulled a cloth from his jacket pocket and began to clean. One key at a time. Not briskly, not with showmanship, with reverence. He moved slowly, gently wiping each ivory surface as if he were tending to a wound, as if each note still remembered the pain of silence, as if music had died here, and he'd returned to prepare it for resurrection. Some guests leaned in, confused. Others sat frozen, unsure whether to laugh or to weep. The cameras, still rolling, captured every motion. His trembling hands, the glint of polish, the way he paused at middle C, pressing his thumb to it just long enough to feel its heartbeat. Then, nothing. He stood upright, closed the lid, and walked off stage. No applause, no encore, just silence, a silence more powerful than any song. Backstage, Harper followed him. She found him near the utility elevator, back against the wall, breathing hard. That was, she began. I couldn't, he said. I'm sorry. She shook her head. You didn't have to. He turned to her. Then why? Harper hesitated, then said softly, because I needed to know if your silence meant surrender or something else. Landon looked away. I'm not ready. I know. She stepped closer. I just needed them to see, she whispered, what it looks like when a man touches a piano like it's the only thing left in the world that still deserves tenderness. His breath caught. Harper smiled sadly. Maybe the kiss wasn't a joke after all. He stared at her, not in disbelief, in recognition. Something had shifted. Not everything. Not yet. But something. That night, the video went viral. A man wiping a piano instead of playing it. No explanation. No words. Just the caption. The kiss she promised. The silence he delivered. Millions watched. Thousands commented. But only a few understood. It wasn't about the song he didn't play. It was about the daughter he did it for, and the woman who no longer found that silence cold. It started with a 37-second clip. No audio, just dim footage from a cracked security camera in the practice room of the Harper Lynn Performing Arts Center. A little girl, Luna, sat at the piano, her fingers fluttering across the keys like moths drawn to light. Her posture was delicate, but her presence radiant, like she belonged in that space more than the piano itself did. The video should have been beautiful, but it was edited, sloppily but just enough. A grainy subtitle appeared. CEO Harper Lynn using sick child as PR stunt. Another. Exploiting terminal illness for fundraising? The internet didn't wait for truth. Within hours, it was everywhere. Reddit threads dissected every frame. Twitter flooded with outrage. A prominent influencer tweeted, "Harper Lynn, CEO or heartless puppet master?" It got 88,000 retweets. The backlash was merciless. Old clips were dug up. Harper giving hard-nosed speeches at shareholder meetings, denying employee bonuses, once firing a VP on Christmas Eve. Out of context? Probably. But perception no longer cared. By morning, Harper's face was on every cable news show with a chyron that read, "CEO under fire, disabled child, corporate greed?" Then came the real blow. At precisely 10:32 a.m., Harper's assistant entered her glass office and closed the door gently behind her. "They've suspended your authority pending internal review," she said quietly. "Effective immediately." Harper didn't react, not visibly. She simply turned away from the desk, stared out at the skyline of Manhattan, cold, majestic, uncaring. "They're eating me alive," she whispered. By late afternoon, Harper sat alone in her office, stripped of her badge access, her laptop surrendered. The room that once felt like a fortress now felt like a tomb. But worse than the betrayal was the silence. No one asked her side. No one questioned the edit. No one cared that Luna had walked into that room on her own, that the piano had drawn her like a heartbeat, that no adult in the building had even known she could play until that moment. No one cared that Harper had been in awe, that she had cried, that for the first time in years, she hadn't seen a quarterly report or PR value. She had seen a little girl, like the one she used to be, longing for a father's song. But none of that fit the narrative. And in a world hungry for villains, silence was always louder than truth. The knock on her door was soft, hesitant. She didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. Landon stood there. Same worn boots, same old jacket, same calm in the storm. She didn't turn. "If you're here to lecture me," she said without looking up, "there's a line forming downstairs." "I'm not." Silence. Then gently, he added, "She cried when she saw the video. Luna." Harper turned slowly. She thought people hated her. Harper's breath caught. "I told her the internet doesn't hate her," he continued. "It just doesn't know her." His voice was even, steady, but something raw simmered underneath. "I told her," he said, "that you didn't make her do anything, that she played because she wanted to." Harper looked away, blinking hard. "And she asked me," he added, "if I believed that." He took one step forward. "So I'm asking you now. Did you?" Her voice broke. "Yes." "Then I believe her. And that means I believe you." Harper finally looked at him. There were no grand gestures, no comforting arms, no poetic speeches. Just one man, tired, grieving, guarded, choosing to trust. And for Harper, that was worth more than 1,000 press statements. "You shouldn't have to defend me," she whispered. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm defending her belief in you." He turned to leave, then paused. "And for what it's worth," he added, You looked a lot more human wiping her tears than you ever did giving a TED Talk. A beat passed, then two. Then Harper, corporate queen, frozen heart, media target, laughed, softly, brokenly. But she laughed. That night, Harper lay awake on her couch. Her apartment, once sleek and curated, felt suddenly too empty. She pulled out her old phone, one she hadn't touched in years. It still held the only voicemail her father ever left her before disappearing from her life. She listened to it and cried. For the first time, not out of anger, but because someone else had believed in her. Because a little girl with a broken heart had played Liszt with more purity than any concert pianist she'd ever signed. Because a janitor had said just enough to make her feel seen again. The world outside screamed in hashtags and outrage, but inside, something softened. Meanwhile, Landon stood by Luna's bedside. She was asleep, one hand curled around a little figurine of a piano. He brushed her hair gently back. "You did nothing wrong, baby," he whispered. "And one day, they'll see." He looked out the window, where city lights blinked like dying stars. And so will she. The hospital hallway hummed with a low, sterile quiet. Past midnight now. The nurses moved softly. The vending machine flickered in protest. And in room 312, a girl with a failing heart breathed slowly, her chest rising with the rhythm of machines that whispered promises no human could keep. Luna was scheduled for surgery at dawn, a risky one of those procedures doctors only attempted when there was no other path forward. No cameras, no press, just machines, medicine, and a father who had no more strength to pray. Landon sat in the corridor outside her room, still in his janitor uniform, but the mop had long been forgotten. Next to him was a large, cloth-covered object, something the night shift nurse mistook for a donation. It was his piano, not the grand ones polished for performance halls. This one was a digital upright, old but faithful. He'd carried it himself from their apartment, up 4 flights of stairs, through taxi rides, past the stares of security guards, until it sat just outside her room, waiting like a witness. He looked at the door, then slowly, quietly, pushed it open. Inside, Luna lay pale and still. A tangle of wires hugged her chest. Her favorite stuffed bear, worn, patched with an old military patch of his, rested beside her. The moonlight pooled across the room, cold and clear. He placed the piano near the wall, facing away from the bed, and for a moment, he just stared at the keys. So many years. So many ghosts. He hadn't touched them since the war. Since the hospital room where his wife had closed her eyes forever to the sound of Liszt's Liebestraum No. 3. He placed both hands gently on the keys. He didn't play loudly. He didn't perform. He offered. What came out wasn't for show. It wasn't for healing the world or proving his name belonged back in the programs of Carnegie Hall. It was a song for one girl, one fragile heart. It started with a whisper. Then it soared. The Franz Liszt repertoire was never meant for quiet rooms. It was for concert halls, for thunderous applause, for hands that wanted to defy physics. But tonight, Landon played Liszt with tenderness. No flash, no ego, just reverence. His fingers danced with impossible speed, yet every note sounded like a prayer. La Campanella drifted into the room, not as a storm, but as a lullaby shaped like wind chimes. Each trill fluttered like wings against the still air. Each arpeggio curved like a hand stroking a child's hair. He didn't stare at the keys. He knew them by heart. He didn't force brilliance. He let it breathe. There was a section in the piece, famously cruel even to virtuosos, where hands must leap octaves with impossible grace, while sustaining melody in both extremes. Landon played it like breathing. His right hand floated in impossibly quick circles. The left kept a heartbeat pulsing beneath it all. The hospital room was no longer cold. It pulsed. It lived. The fluorescent light overhead dimmed and glowed like it, too, understood something holy was happening. Outside the room, a nurse walking her rounds slowed. She froze, her clipboard tilted. Down the hall, a janitor pushing a cart stopped mid-step. Even the man on night watch at the front desk looked up, his mouth parted slightly. No one dared to speak. The sound wrapped around them like warmth on a winter porch. And yet it wasn't just beautiful. It was unreal. It was Liszt, but it was something more. It was as if the composer himself had never imagined his own fire could be turned to lullaby. Landon's hands blurred, but his face remained still. Only his eyes betrayed the truth, glimmering, wet, fixed not on the music, but on the rise and fall of Luna's chest. When the final note rang out, soft, suspended like a secret no one dared disturb, he let it drift, and then silence, the kind of silence that made even the machines hold their breath. He closed the piano lid gently, not letting it click. He didn't say anything. He stood, walked to Luna, and knelt. Brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, he whispered, "Sleep, baby girl. You're not alone." Her fingers, even in sleep, twitched, as if somewhere in that dream, she'd heard everything. The nurse on duty would later say she didn't know what she heard that night, but it didn't sound like human fingers. It sounded like light being poured into a cracked world. The janitor downstairs said he felt his heart do something it hadn't done in years. Remember? The security footage was corrupted by a flicker in the hallway breaker. No one captured it. No one, except a little girl's sleeping memory. Outside the hospital, the city lights blinked on like a broken Morse code. Inside, in room 312, one father walked out the door, dragging the piano behind him, step by heavy step. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't leave a note. But the music stayed behind. Inside a girl, inside a room, inside a world that didn't deserve it, but needed it more than ever. The letter was never meant to be opened. Not really. It had sat on Harper's desk for 3 days, folded neatly in a cream-colored envelope, sealed with the wax insignia of the Harper Lynn Foundation, more out of habit than ceremony. There was no return address, no subject line, just his name, handwritten, pressed gently on the front like a question that never expected an answer. Landon Grant. She had rewritten it 3 times, and even now, as it traveled through the quiet channels of the company's internal mail system, she wished it would vanish, like the music she'd once loved, but forced herself to hate. Inside the letter, the words were simple, but each one bled. When I was 9, I asked my father to play for me, just once. He was a concert pianist. The world had called him genius, prodigy, maestro, until the day my mother died. After that, he never touched the keys again. I remember once, years later, walking past the closed door of our music room. I saw him sitting at the piano, not playing, just sitting, staring, as if the keys had betrayed him. That was the day I started hating the instrument, because it stole the last piece of him I had left. I climbed the ladder in this company, trying to replace melody with metrics, silence with power, but I never found what I lost. Until I saw you, not when you played, but when you cleaned it, like you were laying flowers on a grave no one else remembered. That's when I realized, maybe I never hated the piano. Maybe I just hated what silence took from me. I'm not asking for a reply. This isn't an invitation, just a thank you for reminding me what love used to sound like. She didn't sign her name. She didn't need to. The wax seal was still warm when it reached the mailroom. By the next morning, it had been slid under the janitor's locker door, by someone who didn't know the weight of what they carried. No one saw Landon open it. No one knew if he even read it. But Harper watched every hallway, every elevator, every crowd for the next 5 days, hoping to catch a glance. Nothing came. Not a look. Not a word. And then, there was the church. It was an old cathedral on the edge of the district, an annual charity concert held in its weathered halls, attended by the board, city patrons, and retired artists who still believed music had something sacred to say. Harper was there, out of obligation more than joy. Her name still lingered in scandalous headlines, though public outrage had shifted, like weather, to someone newer. She sat in the second pew, hands folded tight, heart strangely still. She didn't expect him to come. She didn't expect anything, until she heard the whisper behind her. "Is that?" Someone stood at the back of the sanctuary, shoulders broad beneath a charcoal coat, hair tied back, a worn black case in his hand. Landon. He walked slowly, not through the aisle, but along the edge, like a man entering a place not meant for him. No spotlight followed, no applause greeted. He moved toward the small side stage where a modest grand piano rested, untouched since the evening began. Harper rose to her feet before she even realized it. Her breath caught in her throat. She saw it. The case. Not just any instrument. It was the Liszt Steinway, the very one he had played at Carnegie Hall a decade ago. The one everyone believed lost, sold or burned with the past. He placed it gently on the floor, opened the lid, ran a cloth across the keys. And then, he sat. Not facing the crowd, facing the altar, back straight, eyes closed. He did not adjust his cuff. He did not clear his throat. He simply began. There was no microphone, no formal announcement, just the first trembling note, soft, haunting, rising like breath in winter air. It was Liszt's Consolation No. 3, a piece too intimate for stages, too private for praise. Each chord unfolded like a hand reaching out, slow, deliberate, aching. There was no grandeur here, only grace. The audience forgot to cough. A child near the back stopped fidgeting. Even the organ, usually creaking with the chill, seemed to hush itself. Harper watched him play, not like a performer, but like a man speaking to someone long gone. Or maybe, still near. His hands moved with the reverence of someone polishing a memory, not to dazzle, not to prove, but to honor, to remember, and maybe for the first time in 12 years, to forgive. Her vision blurred. She didn't wipe the tears, because she realized something. The letter was never an invitation, but his playing tonight was. Not to her, not yet. To music, to memory, to the part of himself he had locked away with her sympathy, with the war, with every lost moment he never dared relive. He had sent a reply, not in ink, in sound. When the final note faded into the nave, no one clapped. They couldn't. It would have broken the spell. Landon stood, closed the lid, and turned toward the aisle. For a second, his eyes met Harper's, and that was all. He walked past. No words exchanged, no promises made. But as he disappeared into the shadowed doorway, her heart whispered what her voice could not. Come back. And somewhere, in the stillness of an old church filled with ghosts and echoes, she believed he heard. There were no programs handed out that night, no fanfare, no stage lights, just a quiet chapel, bathed in amber candlelight, with pews filled by patrons who had once believed in something greater than silence. And then, he walked in. No tuxedo, no polished shoes, just a man in a worn button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up, collar open, eyes down. Landon Grant. He did not bow. He did not look at the crowd. He walked past the orchestra pit, past the velvet aisle, and stepped onto the raised platform where the grand piano waited. Silent, untouched. There was a hush. Some gasped, recognizing him from the stories. Others whispered his name, half believing this was real. A legend. A ghost. A father. Harper sat in the third row, near the aisle, heart pounding against her ribs like a metronome set too fast. This was no concert. It was a confession. He sat down. No microphone, no stage crew, no conductor. He placed his fingers gently on the keys, almost reverently, and began. The opening notes of Liszt's Liebestraum No. 3 floated out like breath after prayer. Soft, private, wounds dressed in melody. His right hand carried the longing, his left, the weight. Each phrase was shaped not for technique, but for truth, as if the music had lived inside him for years, begging to be let out. Not for glory, but for healing. The church seemed to breathe with him. Every note felt like a thread stitching something back together. Memories, regrets, and the aching pieces of a soul that had been silent too long. There was no spotlight, no crescendo of applause. But something shifted. Somewhere between the second movement's trembling arpeggios and the final aching octave, the audience stopped being observers and became witnesses. Witnesses to a man playing not for applause, but for her. For Harper. For the letter she never meant to send. For the silence she had carried since childhood. For the ache of a girl who never heard her father play again. And now, he played. Not to fix her. Not to prove anything. Just to offer. To share the one thing he had buried beneath grief, fear, war, and fatherhood. And Harper, she broke. No sound escaped her lips, but the tears did. Quiet. Unstoppable. They streamed down her cheeks as if her younger self had finally been seen, heard, and held. By someone who had never touched her hand, but understood the shape of her wounds. No one in the audience reached for their phones. No one whispered. Even the organ above seemed to lean forward, listening. By the time the last note dissolved into the vaulted ceiling, people were holding their breath, afraid that even an exhale would disrupt the fragile miracle they had just witnessed. Landon closed the lid of the piano softly. He didn't stand right away. His head remained bowed, hands resting in his lap, trembling slightly. Then, slowly, he stood, faced the crowd, and for a moment, just one, his eyes found Harper. He gave no smile, but there was something in his gaze. Not sorrow, not pride. Peace, a peace earned, given, and shared. He stepped off the stage, walked down the aisle, and not a single person moved. They all stood. But no one clapped. No one dared. Because sometimes music isn't a performance, it's a prayer, and prayers don't end with applause. They end with silence. When Landon reached the back door of the chapel, he paused. Not for attention, not for thanks, but because he heard something faint behind him. A whisper. Not from Harper, not from Luna, but from the piano itself. A final echo. Like the instrument, too, had been waiting for this moment. To be played, to be forgiven, to be loved again. And so had they all. The surgery was supposed to be routine, but for a child like Luna, whose tiny heart had fought its own war since birth, nothing ever was. The doctors called it a miracle. Harper called it a second chance. But Landon, he didn't say anything. He just sat at Luna's bedside, holding her hand, as the monitors blinked soft green pulses into the dim light. Outside the hospital window, Los Angeles glowed like a city learning to breathe again. Luna stirred gently beneath the covers. Her eyes opened, slowly, blinking, but bright. "Hi, Ba," she whispered. And Landon, a man who had faced war zones and grief, let out a sound that had no shape, just a breath, half a laugh, half a sob. "You stayed," she said. He nodded. Always. The video was never meant to be shared. It had been recorded from the back pew, an old journalist with trembling hands and a half-broken phone. No name, no introduction. Just a grainy clip uploaded with a single caption, dedicated to those who still believe music can heal. It wasn't even titled, no tags, no trending hashtags, but it spread like wildfire anyway. Musicians reposted it, claiming it was the purest Liszt ever played. Veterans shared it, saying, "This man played my pain." Mothers passed it on with captions like, "He played the way I wish someone would love my child." And the children, the ones who couldn't speak, the ones who listened more than they talked, they heard it, not just with ears, but with something deeper. Within a week, the video passed 10 million views. Within 2, someone discovered who the man at the piano was, but by then, it didn't matter. He didn't want the credit. He never did. Harper declined her reinstatement as CEO. The board offered her a clean return, swept under the rug, crisis averted, reputation restored. But she looked around the polished tower of Harper Lynn Corporation. At the corner office, the glass walls, the contracts stacked like barricades against meaning, and quietly said, "No." She walked out carrying nothing, except one small, worn envelope. It was the thank you card Luna had written while recovering. On the front, a child's crayon scrawl, "To the lady who listened." 6 months later, in a converted warehouse near the east side, music spilled from open windows, not in perfect harmony, not in practiced symphony, but in something far more honest, imperfect, joyful, alive. The organization was called Silent and Listening. Its mission, to provide instruments, mentorship, and emotional support to children with rare auditory perception, those who could feel music without reading notes. Children often dismissed by traditional systems. Harper didn't wear power suits anymore. She wore jeans, old sneakers, and kept her blonde hair tied back in a loose ponytail that frizzed in the California sun. But her eyes had never looked clearer. And Luna? She wasn't just a survivor. She was a founder. She stood in front of 20 children, some tapping rhythms on tables, others humming out of sync, and smiled like someone who knew that chaos was just music waiting to find its melody. Luna no longer played to impress. She played to connect, to give what had once saved her, to pass on the healing. One afternoon, while sweeping beneath the old upright piano in the main hall, Harper found a folded slip of paper. No name, no handwriting, just the typed words. "The most powerful music is not what we play, but what we choose to share." She knew who it was from. Landon hadn't returned since the opening ceremony. No headlines, no social media, no news. But sometimes, just after closing, she would hear the distant echo of a single chord. A Liszt arpeggio played so gently it might have been a breeze. And she would smile. Because sometimes, when you've been given something that saved you, you don't chase it. You pass it on. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It had no return address. Inside, a small black flash drive and a note. "Play it, but only if the room is quiet enough to listen." Harper waited until Luna was asleep, until the staff had gone home, until the only sound left was the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floor beneath her feet. She pressed play. It wasn't Liszt. It wasn't classical. It was a lullaby. Simple. 3 chords, 2 hands, and a voice, warm, untrained, but heartbreakingly human, singing the words. You don't have to be loud to be heard. A year had passed. The city had changed, not in the way that made headlines, but in the quieter shifts. The laughter that lingered longer in the park, the way strangers paused when hearing a street musician, or the local news segment titled, "The Music That Found Us." That afternoon, the sun hung low over the city park, casting golden light across rows of folding chairs and picnic blankets. There was no banner, no red carpet, just a hand-painted sign held up by 2 kids that read, "Come listen with us." Harper stood quietly behind the stage, if you could call it that. It was just a wooden platform, borrowed from the community center, with fairy lights strung overhead and a slightly out-of-tune upright piano tucked under a shade tree. The event was small by any corporate standard. No PR team, no sponsors, just families, folding chairs, and a little girl tuning her violin like it was a sacred ceremony. Harper didn't wear heels anymore. She had on flat sandals and a simple white dress. Her blonde hair was braided loosely down her back, and in her lap was a clipboard filled with messy schedules and snack vouchers. But her eyes, they were steady, clear, like someone who finally stopped running. On stage, Luna adjusted her seat, gave a small nod to her father, and began. It wasn't Liszt. It wasn't grand. It was simple. A lullaby she had composed herself, with soft chord changes and warm, meandering notes that seemed to drift out toward the sky. Landon sat beside her at the piano, playing rhythm under her melody, not leading, not showing, just supporting, like a steady current beneath a boat that knew how to float on its own. No spotlight, no applause mid-song, just listening. And that was enough, more than enough. Backstage, Harper watched with her hand pressed lightly over her heart. It wasn't pride, exactly. It was something older, something that felt like forgiveness folding into gratitude. As the last note faded, the audience didn't erupt, not immediately. They exhaled, and then they stood. No clapping, not at first, just rising, as if some part of them had been lifted, and they needed to meet the music halfway in the air. After the final bow, Luna bounded down the steps, sweat on her forehead and joy in her eyes. She ran straight past the lemonade table, past the balloon arch, and right into Harper's arms. "You saw?" she grinned. "I saw," Harper laughed. Then Luna leaned in, eyes twinkling. "Bah says, you still owe him a kiss from that Liszt night." Harper froze, then laughed harder than she had in months. "Oh, does he now?" Luna just shrugged, turned around, and raced back toward the food truck line like she'd just delivered a court order and washed her hands of it. Landon approached slowly, wiping his hands with a handkerchief, as he always did after touching a piano. Same faded shirt, same quiet steps. But something in him stood taller now, not as a man who had found the stage again, but as one who had learned he didn't need it to matter. He stopped a few feet from her, a playful glint in his eye. "She makes things up," he said dryly. "You know kids." "She's not wrong," Harper replied, lifting an eyebrow. They stood in silence for a moment, the summer breeze brushing between them. Then Harper took his hand, the same hand that once scrubbed floors at her corporate tower, the same hand that had tucked in a daughter through nights of fear, the same hand that played Liszt not to impress, but to heal. And she lifted it gently and kissed it, not for show, not out of pity, but with reverence, for a man who had once played in war, then chose instead to play for peace. Later that evening, after the park emptied and Luna had fallen asleep in the back seat of the car, Harper and Landon sat on the hood of the van, feet bare, watching the stars try to outshine the city lights. "Do you ever miss it?" Harper asked softly. "The stage, the spotlight." Landon shook his head. "I never played to be seen," he said. "I just didn't know that back then." She nodded, pulling her knees up to her chest. "And now?" He looked at her. Really looked. "I play for one person now," he said, "and she just kissed my hand." She smiled, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to lead. She could just listen. Weeks later, someone found a handwritten note taped to the back of that old upright piano in the park. It read, "Technique might impress, but kindness, that's the part you remember." Below it, a line in a child's handwriting. Love doesn't need to be loud, just true. And maybe in the right key. We'd love to know. Where are you watching from today? It always amazes us how stories, just like music, find their way to hearts across the world. If this story touched you in any way, if it reminded you of something you've lost, or something you still believe in, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story. Every new tale is crafted with care to bring a little more light into your day. Thank you for spending this moment with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop listening for the music between the words.